Hi Sebastian. So I've had a little look at your video and what you're having issues with, and first off, I just gotta agree with the other Sebastian in the thread, which says that you should do more joints, because that will really help you doing this kind of stuff with just one joint, or basically two joints in this case. You can do it, but it's just gonna be more difficult, man. Um, Doing a bunch more joints and doing the spline IK might be the easiest just to animate, because then you just do the clusters on the curve and then animate it. Or you could just do like a really simple FK setup. Like you could even just have one more joint here, and that would be a lot easier. So I definitely recommend you to look into that. Also, just touching upon this undo issue that you had, that usually happens when you have IK setups in your scene, and when you just move that around, and I think it's if you move like the joint around as well. So what you really want to do is when you make like an IK setup, instead of just moving around like the IK handle, you would want to, for instance, do like just a locator or something, which you could parent the IK handle underneath, and then you would move around the locator. Um, and yeah, if I just do like freeze for here, for example, so that you can move that around, but you can always zero it out. This is the basis of like a normal control rig as well, that you will have control, and then you will group that control, and then you will move the group into place so that the control has zeroed out values. Just a little heads up on that. Let me just get rid of this because I don't want the IK either way. Another thing is also that if you move stuff around, Maya has a built-in function which is the bind pose, and that basically stores the information about how the joints were translated and rotated and scaled. I'm pretty sure it does as well. Um, when when you bind it. So if I select this now, go to skin, go to bind pose, then it's back where it started out, exactly like. But don't rely on this too much, because the bind pose can often get messed up, especially if you do rebinds or like if you're skinning more stuff in the scene. It can get really messed up at times. Um, Another thing that you can also do is to select all your joints, and then if you, for instance, go to like frame 0 and you just keyframe it there, and then, or you could do like -50 or something, which you would never work on. Like normally you'd work between 1 and like something else, so that now you can move these around, but you can always go back to that frame 0 to have this. That, or I'm sure there's a bunch of scripts online where you can set like default values, like set poses, which you could just make to set like an initial like skinning pose or something like that. So I recommend you check into that. Um, so let's just jump into this issue as well that you're having. First off, the making a gradient like that when you want complete control over it, I would not recommend using the brush for that, because it's going to be too inaccurate. And that's basically because of the blending of when you're painting. Um, Another thing that I noticed was that you really have this quite high as well. Um, but let's just see. Yeah, so one thing is the gradient here, just so that we're on the same page, because I'm not sure from your video. This is just used for the color feedback, right? So I'm just going to turn off the wireframe just to show this a bit more clearly. So if I go up here and I do that, and I do this as well, see we're starting to get this stuff now, and we're starting to get this down here. So what's really important to remember when you're using a brush like this is that it's basically radial. So what's happening when you're going over here is that it will like double up. We'll see that here. So basically your hair was the first stroke. And on the second stroke it comes in as well and goes over this, and that's why you're getting a new line there, because basically if you're painting in like Photoshop with a really soft brush and you do one stroke, it'll be soft. But if you do a stroke the other way or like across it, you will get a much harder line or like a harder connection where those two strokes meet each other. So that's basically the issue that you're getting here, because when you go around and you do this, you see as soon as I do that, we get this like on here. It's like orange, yellow, green, orange, yellow, green. But as soon as I paint, I've got like the orange, yellow, green here. But now these are completely red, which is basically mean that they're almost fully solid. So that's why you really don't want to like use a brush for something like this, and with such a large radius it's going to be really inaccurate, and you don't want to do that. So if you go back, what I would do if you're quite intent on doing it this way is I would do select the oops, why I would select the verts, because what that's really important to remember is that every like painting stuff that you do in Maya, if it's weighting deformers or painting the skin cluster, you can do that on a selection basis as well. So you can do stuff like this. So if we come in and we select joint 2, I can now do just replace to 1, and we have that. And again, like all these operations will now work within this spectrum here. So what you can do is go a little bit further, then you can just start to smooth as well, and now you will get a perfectly smooth gradient throughout here. This isn't going to be really good though, because you will have to sit there like this for quite some while before you get like a really soft fall off because of the maths involved, and since you're just going in between 2 and this thing, yeah, you can play with it. I don't think it will be the best thing, but and then again after I had done this I would go back and just make sure this is completely white. Yeah, I could even do a bit more, so something like that. Again, just dealing with 2 of these, so yeah, so we got a quite nice fall off on this now. But like you were showing with your stuff, I'm just making sure that we're on the same page with when you said you were moving it like this. You would never just move a joint like this, because this is doing exactly what it's supposed to now. Because all these verts that it's influenced, they're following exactly the transformation of the joint. So if you just translate it over, these will just be translated over as much as it's skinned. Just making sure that we're on the same page with this, because it was a bit unclear from your video how much of like rigging you've done before. So for something like this, you would have to translate it and rotate it. And here's where the problem with this kind of skinning comes in, is as soon as you have like, if you do something like this to get one of these shapes, you're really going to get like crunching up here, or like you're going to lose a lot of volume because of just how as soon as you start to rotate, especially rotate joints with like soft skinning, you're very prone to lose a lot of oh sorry, weight volume. You could possibly try to do DQ skinning for this would probably be better, because that is really better aimed at doing rotational skinning as well, and dealing with rotations. So if you do dual quaternion instead of classic linear, that could also help you, just for something simple like this. But yeah, for something like this, again, if you just add in like a new joint here, if we do insert joint tool, well, just get this up a bit. Oh, anyway, it should have just allowed me to move it up, but never mind. And if I add in this influence, skin, add influence, back in, this will just allow you to deal with this bend a lot easier, because it will control where all this stuff goes. And then again, if we add in this joint as like, let me go and just do add some here. If we do something like this as well, I'm just going to do it really rough now. And another, I can show you quickly now that I've got this really crap skinning, something that you can do is hammer weights can be really useful. I'm not sure, yeah, does a pretty decent job for this. Another really cool plugin is something called NG Skin Tools, which has, which basically allows you to paint like in layers, like in Photoshop, but just using the plugin has a lot of nice features with like relax, and this also even takes in the soft selection in Maya. So if I just take this down a bit, if we relax this even more, and this is really good for keeping, it's usually pretty good at keeping the volume as well. So again, something like this. It's like, whoop. Yeah. So you see, as soon as you start rotating this again, you're going to lose volume, and that's where the spline IK setup that Sebastian mentioned is really good as well. So I'd really recommend that you do something like that. Absolutely. So yeah, and with the, even if you did like an IK setup for this, you wouldn't get anything out of it, because an IK only rotates like the first child, or like the child's like in between the start and end, so the end wouldn't really get anything, but this would be rotating around, and you would still have to move this because you want to do all of that. If I just get this back, see if the bind post works now. It does. So usually what's really common in Maya is to think of this as just like an endpoint and not really use it for much, and then everywhere from where you want to do like a bend, you have an extra joint. This just makes it a bit more visual and easier to work with, and as well to see what's like really going on. So yeah, I recommend doing that. I hope some of this was useful, and good luck with your assignment. Bye.